All right, if you guys heard about this company, DeepSeek, it's this Chinese company, and they're kind of making everybody in AI do a double take. And we dove into all your sources on them, and it's pretty crazy. I mean, it's like the whole game might be changing.
Yeah, it's definitely causing a stir for sure. Yeah. DeepSeek has actually introduced not one but two, count them two, new AI models.
Oh, wow.
R1 for language and Janus Pro, a multimodal model.
And here's the thing, right? They're claiming to get like similar results to the big names everyone knows.
Right.
Like OpenAI, but for a fraction of the cost.
Right.
Like way, way less money. I mean, they're saying they built an AI similar to ChatGPT for something like $5 million.
Right.
While these other companies are spending billions.
That's the claim that has everyone buzzing right now.
Yeah.
Like, is that even possible?
And if it's true, it could completely flip the script on how we think about AI.
Yeah.
So, first things first.
Who is DeepSeek? Are they kind of a mystery? They are relatively new on the scene.
Okay.
Based in Hong Kong. And yeah, they kind of had a splashy entrance.
Okay.
Their AI assistant app, which is powered by these new models, shot to the top of the App Store charts, even surpassing ChatGPT for a hot minute.
Oh, wow.
You know, for a Chinese company to make such a big splash right now in this tech environment, like, especially with all this talk about U.S. export controls and all that stuff.
Yeah.
It's really saying something.
It really is, yeah.
Yeah.
And here's where I think it gets even more interesting.
Yeah.
It seems like they may have actually used Meta's open source AI model Llama as like a foundation.
Yeah, so Meta and potentially others may have unintentionally helped DeepSeek get ahead.
So it's like they used the Meta's work to...
That's the thing with open source, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes that's the irony of it, is that it's meant to be collaborative and move things forward. But sometimes you have situations like this where a company will kind of leapfrog the company that put out the open source model.
Yeah, it's like, hey, thanks for all the work. Now we're going to just take it and run with it.
Yeah, and Meta and others have definitely expressed frustration over this.
I bet.
You know, it really kind of raises those questions about how open source works in this competitive landscape.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's dive into these models now.
Okay.
Starting with R1. This is the one that some are calling the ChatGPT challenger. DeepSeek says it matches GPT-4's performance.
Right.
And the sources are just like buzzing.
People are very excited about this.
Yeah.
They're trying to figure out what this could mean for the future of AI.
Yeah, like what does that even mean? Like if a model that's a fraction of the cost can do what GPT-4 can do, that just throws this whole AI arms race into question.
Totally. I mean, it's like, imagine if a small team, you know, could suddenly create something that rivals what the giants are making. Right. It kind of makes you wonder.
It does.
Can smaller, more nimble teams out-innovate the big guys?
Yeah.
And the answer might be yes.
And I think this is like the proof is in the pudding, so to speak. When DeepSeek announced this, some of the sources said that NVIDIA, their stock actually dipped a bit.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because, you know, NVIDIA is known for providing
chips.
Exactly, the expensive chips for these big AI projects.
Right.
So it's almost like DeepSeek saying, hey, we found a smarter way to do this. We don't need all that.
We don't need those expensive chips.
Yeah.
We can do it for less.
We can do it with less. Yeah. And now everyone's trying to figure out, are they bluffing? Or has the game really changed?
Yeah.
But how is that possible? You can't, I mean, building something this advanced can't be that cheap, can it?
Yeah. Well, so what DeepSeek is saying is they're using these new training techniques that are way more efficient.
Okay.
And they're not as reliant on massive computing power. So for example, they say they're able to focus the model on the most relevant data, cutting down on the need for a lot of extra processing. So instead of just throwing raw computing power at the problem, they're being more strategic with their approach.
So it's more about like working smarter, not harder.
Exactly. And on top of that, they've leveraged existing open source projects, you know, like things from Alibaba, even Meta. They built upon those existing frameworks, refining them and adapting them to create their final products. So it's this combination of being smart about how they approach it and leveraging what's already out there.
That's really clever. But is it ethical? I mean, some of the sources are saying that DeepSeek essentially piggybacked on these Western open source frameworks.
Right.
And it's raising questions about fairness.
Yeah, I mean, it does raise questions about reciprocity in open source, right? Like, is it just a one-way street? Or should there be a more mutual exchange of knowledge and contributions? I think DeepSeek's approach is sparking a lot of conversation about how those open source principles actually function, especially in a global context like this.
Especially when you consider the current U.S.-China tech rivalry.
Exactly, yeah. And speaking of China.
Right, because there's this whole thing with DeepSeek's AI assistant allegedly avoiding questions about the Chinese government.
Right.
It just makes you wonder, like, how much control and transparency is there really?
It's a valid concern. And, we should be thinking about this more broadly in AI development. Like, as AI gets more powerful, who ultimately decides what it can and cannot do?
Right.
How do we prevent bias? How do we make sure it's being used responsibly?
Right.
These are questions that we're all going to have to answer as AI gets more advanced.
Okay, so that's R1. Now let's talk about the other model, Janus Pro. This is the multimodal one. What's so special about this one?
So multimodal basically means it can work with both text and images.
Ooh, that's cool.
So it's like, imagine an AI that can understand language, but it can also see. So, it can generate images.
Oh, wow.
It can analyze them. It can still hold conversations. It can perform tasks. It's like having a super smart assistant who can also, visualize things.
That is so cool. So how does that stack up against the competition? Because the sources did mention some comparisons with GPT-4 Vision,
right,
which is also multimodal.
Right. So the great thing about Janus Pro is it's open source.
Oh.
Which means the community can contribute.
Right.
They can help develop it. They can potentially make it better, which is always a plus, right? However, its image quality,
okay,
while decent, might not be as refined as some models that are specifically built for image generation,
right,
like Stable Diffusion, for example. So there's trade-offs.
Yeah.
Some models are really good at specific things. Others are trying to be more versatile. So it just really depends on what your priorities are.
The sources actually had some fun with this. They had someone prompted both Janus Pro and Stable Diffusion.
Oh, that's cool.
To generate a cute baby fox in an autumn scene.
Oh, cute.
I know, right? And Janus Pro apparently nailed the baby aspect.
Okay.
While Stable Diffusion, it made a more beautiful picture.
Okay. So Stable Diffusion won on the artistic merit.
Yeah.
But Janus Pro
got the baby, right?
Janus Pro got the specifics of the prompt.
Yeah.
Which I think is interesting. It just shows you how different models interpret those prompts. It's fascinating to see how they execute those.
It is really interesting. Okay, so DeepSeek is really shaking things up. This is pretty clear. So is this just hype? Or are we seeing a real change here in how AI is developed? Who are the big players now?
That is the billion-dollar question, isn't it?
It is. And we are going to talk about that more when we come back right after the break. So DeepSeek is shaking things up. These new models, they claim to be super cost-effective, and they're all in on open source, which, that's a whole other can of worms.
Let's unpack that a little bit, because that's sparking a lot of conversation.
The sources were kind of all over the place with this.
Yeah.
Some were praising DeepSeek for sharing their technology.
Yeah.
Others are like, hold on, are they playing fair here?
It's a really complex issue, Open source has been this huge driving force in AI. I mean, it's helped foster collaboration, speed up progress.
Right.
It's think of it as a big global brainstorming session where everybody's throwing in ideas, building off of each other's work.
Right, like with Stable Diffusion.
Yeah. Exactly.
Where the community came in and created all these specialized data sets and really pushed the model forward.
Exactly.
In ways that I don't think even the creators really anticipated.
And that's the beauty of open source, is that it allows for that kind of, unexpected innovation.
Right.
But with DeepSeek, it's a little different because there's this question of, are they really embracing the whole spirit of open source?
Right.
Some people are saying, they benefited a lot from these open source frameworks, particularly from the West.
Right.
But it's not clear if they've given back as much.
Right. So it's like they took the recipe, baked the cake, and didn't share any of the leftovers.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder about the balance of contribution in the open source world, especially when you have companies coming from very different cultures and political backgrounds.
Right. And that brings us back to that whole China factor.
Exactly.
Which is,
adds another layer to this.
It really does.
Yeah.
It just makes you think, when we were talking about that AI assistant from DeepSeek, that was supposedly dodging questions about the Chinese government.
Right. It makes you wonder, like, what kind of control is there? How much transparency is there, really?
Those are valid questions, and I think we should really be having this conversation more broadly, about AI ethics and governance, because as AI gets more and more powerful, we have to decide, like, who gets to decide what it can and cannot do.
Right.
How do we make sure that it doesn't perpetuate harmful biases?
Right.
Or that it's not being used to promote specific agendas?
Yeah, this is getting, like, pretty heavy.
Yeah.
Because it's not just, like, a theoretical conversation.
Yeah.
The sources mentioned that, like, DeepSeek's rise actually kind of spooked Wall Street a bit.
Yeah.
Like,
absolutely.
It had real-world implications.
Yeah, I mean, when their apps started getting all that popularity, combined with these claims about how cheap it was to develop, it kind of sent shockwaves through the industry.
Yeah.
Like, NVIDIA's stock price actually dropped.
And investors started to question, like, is this whole AI arms race sustainable?
Right.
With all this emphasis on buying these expensive, high-powered chips,
right.
It's like DeepSeek threw a grenade into the established order, and everyone's trying to figure out how to respond.
It's almost like they challenged the very foundation of how things were being done.
Exactly.
And they said, no, we could do it differently.
And it's forcing these established players to rethink everything.
Yeah.
Do they need to keep spending all this money on massive computing power? Or is there a smarter, more efficient way to innovate?
And I think this is what's so interesting to me. It's almost like a narrative thing.
Yeah.
DeepSeek, in a way, they're kind of like the underdog here.
Oh, yeah.
They're like the scrappy startup taking on the giants. Like,
It's a classic tale.
It's David and Goliath.
Totally.
And I think that's part of what's so captivating about it.
Yeah. It captures people's imaginations,
right?
And it makes you wonder, like, can these smaller, more agile teams really compete with big tech?
Right. Like, is this a real challenge to their dominance?
Or will the big players just adapt and maintain their grip?
I don't know.
It's an open question.
Like, DeepSeek has made this splash, but is it a wave?
Yeah.
Or is it going to fizzle out?
Well, I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Right.
But I think to really understand the long-term implications, we need to talk about the geopolitical side of things.
Okay, let's do it.
Because that's a huge factor here.
You can't talk about technology and not talk about politics.
No, absolutely not. And especially when you're talking about something as powerful as AI.
Right.
And you have a Chinese company like DeepSeek making these waves. It's bound to have geopolitical implications.
The sources mention that, like, DeepSeek's rise is being framed as this direct challenge to the U.S.'s dominance in the tech sector.
A lot of people are calling it a wake-up call for the West,
Right.
They're seeing it as a sign that China is catching up.
Right.
Maybe even surpassing the U.S. when it comes to AI.
Yeah. And that's got to be, like, a scary thought for some people.
Well, it's definitely fueling concerns about, a potential shift in global power.
Right.
And there's even talk of, like, a new AI arms race.
Oh, wow.
Between the U.S. and China. It's really heating up.
So is this like a Cold War 2.0, but with AI?
I mean, there are definitely some parallels there.
Yeah.
Both countries see AI as strategically important.
Right.
Not just for the economy, but also, national security.
Right.
Global influence.
The sources actually mention that AI could be like a major player in future military tech.
Oh, yeah.
Surveillance systems, even political strategies, which is kind of a chilling thought.
It's a little unsettling to think about, but it's the reality we're facing.
So where does this all leave, like, the average person? Someone who's not necessarily following all these geopolitical things.
I think the big takeaway here is that we're entering this new era where AI isn't just this cool technology anymore. It's something that's shaping global power dynamics.
Right.
And the decisions that governments make, corporations make about how AI is developed, how it's used, how it's regulated, those are going to have huge consequences for all of us.
So what are we supposed to do? It just seems so overwhelming.
It's a lot to process, but I think the most important thing is to stay informed.
Okay.
To engage in these conversations about AI, both the good and the bad.
Yeah.
Because the future is being shaped right now.
Right.
And we all have a role to play in making sure AI is used responsibly.
Wow, this is a lot.
It is.
This is giving me a lot to think about, that's for sure.
Yeah.
DeepSeek is so much more than just, like, a tech story.
It is.
It's really a glimpse into the future.
Yeah.
Where AI is just like woven into everything. Our lives, the global landscape, like everything.
It's a fascinating story, and it's still unfolding.
Right. And who knows what's next?
Exactly. And that's what's so exciting about it.
Right. Like it's still being written.
It is.
And DeepSeek has shown that like sometimes it's these unexpected players that really make the biggest impact.
They come out of nowhere and shake things up.
So to all our listeners out there, keep your eyes peeled.
Stay curious.
Because this AI revolution, it's just getting started.
And who knows? Maybe you'll be the one to write the next chapter.
Maybe, yeah. That's it for our deep dive into DeepSeek.
It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And until next time, stay curious. So DeepSeek, this Chinese company, they're really shaking up the AI world.
Yeah.
But there's this whole other thing we got to talk about, like this geopolitical tension.
Right.
It's kind of a big deal, right?
Absolutely. I mean, you can't really separate the tech from the politics, especially when it comes to something as powerful as AI, right? And when you have a Chinese company like DeepSeek that's suddenly making such big waves, well, people are going to take notice.
Yeah. And the sources are saying that, like, DeepSeek's success is being seen as a direct challenge to, the U.S.'s dominance in tech.
Yeah, a lot of people are calling it a wake-up call, for the West. Like, hey, China's catching up fast.
Right. And it's even being framed as, like, this new AI arms race heating up between the U.S. and China.
The competition's definitely getting more intense, and both countries, they know how important AI is going to be, not just for the economy, but for national security and, having influence on the world stage.
Yeah, and the sources were talking about how AI could be used in, like, military tech, surveillance systems, even political strategies, which is kind of scary to think about.
It is a bit unsettling, yeah. But it's the reality we're facing. AI is going to have a massive impact on global affairs. And DeepSeek, they're kind of a reminder that this isn't just some, friendly competition. It's tied to some pretty big political and ideological differences.
So, okay, big picture here. What does all this mean for, like, the average person?
I think the takeaway is that AI isn't just a tech thing anymore. It's a major force in how the world is going to be shaped. And the choices that our governments and these big companies make about AI, those decisions are going to have a huge impact on all of us, whether we realize it or not.
It feels like a lot to keep up with,
It is, but that's why it's so important to stay informed and to really engage in these conversations about AI, the good parts and the bad parts, because we're shaping the future right now. And we need to make sure that AI is developed and used responsibly. It's a big responsibility.
It is, yeah. Well, this whole deep dive has been really eye-opening, I got to say. DeepSeek, it's way more than just a tech story. It's like a window into the future. And that future AI is going to be a part of everything, like our daily lives, how countries interact, the whole thing.
It's a fascinating story. And, it's not over yet. Who knows what twists and turns are coming next?
That's the exciting part, right? It's still being written. And DeepSeek has shown us that, hey, sometimes these unexpected players, they can really change the game. So to everyone listening out there, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and don't be afraid to, like, challenge the status quo, because this AI revolution is just getting started.
And you never know, maybe you'll be the one to write the next chapter.
Maybe.